Today, the National Press Club. Assistant Minister for Productivity, Competition, Charities and Treasury, Andrew Leigh. Mr Leigh will outline the case for strengthening Australia's charities and their role in community life to help build a stronger civil society. Andrew Leigh with today's National Press Club address.
Hello and welcome to the National Press Club and today's Westpac address. My name's Tom Connell. I'm the president here at the club and also a host at Sky News Australia. Our speaker today is Andrew Leigh, Assistant Minister for Productivity, Competition, Charities and Treasury. And his theme today, Rebuilding Trust, the future of Australia's charities and community life. It's tempting to perhaps go on a tangent about trust and maybe a politician, given politicians are often ranked near the bottom of professions for trust, but so are journalists, so perhaps I won't throw stones from this particular glass house. We have seen volunteering and memberships of community organisations declining in recent years. Andrew is going to outline the government's efforts to ameliorate that. The goal is not without its challenges and recent criticism too. Only last week, the coalition of church and charity leaders criticised the Albanese government's changes on discretionary trust and capital gains, warning it could have unintended consequences and severely reduce philanthropic funding. I remind our members the club will have a podcast of this address on our website later today. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. Andrew Leigh.
Well, thanks very much, Tom, for a really generous introduction. Can I acknowledge at the outset we're meeting on the lands of the Ngunnawal people? Daranuna, Daranunawal, Yungu, Nalamanyan, Dunimanyan, Ngunnawalwari, Darawari, Dindi, Wangaralin, Jinyin. I'd acknowledge all First Nations people present and the many terrific charities who do such important work towards closing the gaps. Thanks to Maurice Riley and the National Press Club Board, my parliamentary colleague Alicia Payne, Head of the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, Sue Woodward, and my Chief of Staff and co-author, Nick Terrell. I'm especially chuffed to have with us today my wife Gwyneth, with whom I've shared the happiest work of all, building a family and helping build community in our neighbourhood. Let me start with a story. In 1864, within the space of 4 months, 2 Australian ships were shipwrecked on Auckland Island, south of New Zealand. The first, the Invercargill, was wrecked on the northwest of the island. Its captain, George Dalgarno, took the approach of every man for himself. The crew splintered. The strong abandoned the weak. One desperate sailor resorted to cannibalism. Within a year, only 3 of the original 25 sailors had survived. The second ship was the Grafton, wrecked on the southeast. Its captain, Thomas Musgrave, took a different approach. His 5 sailors worked together. They built a hut, shared food, cared for one another, and even made a chess set to keep their minds alive. After 18 months, they sailed hundreds of kilometres to seek rescue. Every sailor survived. Same island, different social bargain. We economists spend plenty of time talking about capital. Physical capital is roads, bridges and machines. Human capital is education, skills and experience. Social capital is the invisible infrastructure of a country, whether people trust one another, join together, volunteer to help the needy, and feel responsible for more than themselves. When social capital is strong, communities solve problems sooner. Businesses transact with less friction. Governments of different stripes collaborate. People have someone to call on when the cancer diagnosis comes, when the house floods, when the job vanishes, when the neighbour needs a hand. When social capital weakens, a country becomes lonelier, scratchier, less resilient and harder to govern. Everything takes more checking, more guarding, more legal drafting, more suspicion. The national mood gets brittle. Problems that could be solved around a table are left to fester. That's why I want to speak today about rebuilding trust. This is a speech about charities and community life. But it's also a speech about democracy, well-being and productivity. Trust is national infrastructure, and charities are among its best builders. In our 2020 book, Reconnected, Nick Terrell and I documented a long decline in Australian civic life. Over recent decades, the number of Australian associations per person has fallen by 4/5, and the share of people involved in social, civic and political groups has declined. Across a dozen large organisations, the membership rate is down by 3/4 since the mid-1960s. The share of people attending a religious service at least once a month fell from half the population in the late 1940s to now 1 in 7. Union membership is down from half the workforce in the early 80s to 1 in 8. Compared with past decades, Australians are less satisfied with democracy and less interested in elections. On the playing field, 3/5 of sports, including tennis, golf, cricket and rugby, are on the wane. Australians are giving up organised sports in favour of unorganised activities, such as walking and gym going. Our survey research found that the typical Australian had half as many close friends as in the mid-1980s and knew only about half as many neighbours. The latest General Social Survey suggests this pattern has continued. From 2019 to 2025, the share of Australians who agreed that most people can be trusted fell from 55% to 50%. Formal volunteering through an organisation fell from 30% to 23%. Involvement in social groups fell from 51% to 45%. Involvement in community support groups fell from 25% to 21%. Involvement in civic and political groups fell from 9% to 7%. That's a lot of decline for one survey. If civic life were a cricket team, our nation would be standing at long on, wondering why only 7 people had turned up. Australia remains, by global standards, a generous and cohesive nation. Yet the broad pattern is plain. Civic life has thinned. Fewer volunteers, fewer joiners, less trust. That should concern every Australian. A country with fewer volunteers, fewer joiners and less trust is a country with a thinner safety net beneath daily life. After fires and floods, Australians are magnificent. We donate, cook, shovel and comfort. The question is how to carry some of that spirit into ordinary times. How to make generosity less episodic and more durable. How to turn occasional helping into ongoing joining. That's where charities come in. A charity is often where an Australian first learns that citizenship is a verb. It might be the local footy club that teaches a teenager to coach under 10s. The neighbourhood house where a new migrant finds her first job. The community legal centre that helps a tenant keep a roof overhead. The food relief charity that sees hardship before the statistics catch up. The arts organisation that gives a town a stage and a story. The environmental group that turns concern into planting and stewardship. Social psychologist Jonathan Haidt, citing E.O. Wilson, argues that humans aren't just social creatures, we're ultra-social. We love to do things with others. In fact, I'm willing to bet that your happiest memories are of times spent with others. Playing on a team, celebrating a wedding, holidaying with friends. Charities do more than deliver services. They create belonging. They carry memory. They build trust by giving people repeated opportunities to work alongside others. In my own electorate, Stepping Stone Cafe is founded on the idea that hospitality can change lives. Over the past decade, it's helped more than 60 migrant and refugee women take part in meaningful work. Last year, its founders, Vanessa Brattel and Hannah Costello, were named Australian of the Year Local Heroes. Their model works. English classes, cafe jobs and partner employers create a pathway from language to work and from work to belonging. Such connections strengthen politics. Czech president and poet Václav Havel often spoke about how important it was for a democracy to have a strong social life. Havel gave the example of citizens who joined together in a beer brewing club. By taking pride in their beer making and coming to know others who do it well, they're creating civil society. A strong democracy needs institutions between the individual and the state. Families, unions, churches, schools, clubs, local media, cultural bodies, charities, neighbourhood organisations and beer brewing clubs all do this work. They help people practice cooperation. They give citizens a place to speak, serve and belong. One of the great errors in public debate is to treat charities as subcontractors for government. Many charities do deliver programs, often with public support, but their value is much deeper than that. Charities can see where the official stats are missing people. They can advocate, they can innovate, they can ask uncomfortable questions. A confident democracy lets charities speak. That's why our government has worked to reset the relationship. When we came to office, many charities were reeling from the former government's war on charities, which had seen 3 open letters from the sector to successive Liberal Prime Ministers, asking them to back off their attacks on charities. Charitable advocacy was under fire, with environmental, legal and social welfare charities being told to just keep quiet. The Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission was led by a well-known charity critic. Since coming to office, we've chosen a different path, engaging respectfully with Australia's great charity sector. Perhaps nothing better illustrates this than the fact that the grouping known as Hands Off Our Charities under the former government has rebranded as the Stronger Charities Alliance. Our government has made clear that charitable advocacy belongs in Australian democracy. A homelessness charity should be able to talk housing policy. An environmental charity should be able to talk about the environment. A community legal centre should be able to talk about law reform. A disability charity should be able to talk about inclusion and dignity. Labor has backed a Stronger Charities Commission. We appointed Sue Woodward, one of the sector's most respected leaders, as Commissioner. Under her leadership, the Commission has become more open to the sector and more willing to test what works. Just one example, the Commission recently partnered with the Australian Centre for Evaluation to conduct a randomised trial designed to boost on-time submissions of charity annual information statements. Let's be honest, did you really expect me to get through this speech without spruiking randomised trials? Our government's refreshed the Charities Commission Advisory Board, bringing First Nations, multicultural and youth perspectives to the table, alongside state and territory representatives. We changed the law to allow the Charities Commission to better protect public trust by speaking out about harmful breaches of compliance. Giving funds should do what their name promises: give. We've lifted the minimum distribution to 6% of net assets, which is expected to see an extra $60 million a year flow to charities. At the same time, we're allowing funds to smooth distributions over 3 years. That means a fund can help a charity build something really substantial, rather than being forced into a pattern of small annual grants. Treasury analysis shows that a fund receiving market returns and distributing 6% each year could keep supporting charities for decades, even without further contributions to its assets. We've also worked with states and territories to establish national fundraising principles. We've created a new tax-deductible category for community foundations. We've streamlined tax-deductible charity processes for environmental organisations, harm prevention charities, cultural organisations and overseas aid organisations. We've scrapped the $2 minimum threshold for tax-deductible donations, helping make small gifts easier, including round-up giving at the checkout. On top of this, today I can announce that our government will help remove a persistent paperwork problem for charities. For too long, mismatches between the Corporate Regulators Register and the Charities Commission Register have meant information entered in one place hasn't always flowed neatly to the other. At charity town halls across the country, I heard this frustration again and again. We're committing over $2 million to help the two regulators better align their registers, so charities can spend fewer hours filling duplicate forms and more time doing the work they were created to do. Good regulation should protect trust while preserving purpose. The aim is regulation with a backbone, rather than regulation with a clipboard addiction. Now, I want to set out the next stage of that work. It begins with a simple proposition. Australia needs a trust agenda. A trust agenda has 4 parts. More places for Australians to give locally. A stronger culture of bequest giving. Better digital capability for charities. Continued partnership with the sector on the reform blueprints now before us. First, local giving. One of the most promising movements in Australian philanthropy is the growth of community foundations. Community foundations have sprung up in places such as Albany, Alice Springs, Albury and Adelaide, to take just one letter of the alphabet. They pool local generosity, build endowments, fund grassroots organisations and keep resources close to local knowledge. A community foundation can create a table around which others can gather. It can keep memory when personnel change. It can hold a long horizon when institutions are tempted by the next quarter, the next grant round or the next headline. For years, Australian community foundations operated with a structural handicap. They were trusted locally, but the national tax framework did too little to recognise their model. That's begun to change. The new tax-deductible community category, charity category, gives community foundations a more suitable home in the tax system. Earlier this year, I was pleased to declare dozens of additional community foundations as community charities, allowing them to seek tax-deductible endorsement from the Tax Office. Our government's moving now to remove the ministerial declaration requirement as the gateway for that endorsement. As an Assistant Minister, I try to be useful, and occasionally that means getting out of the way. Good governance and public accountability remain central, but community foundations that satisfy the law should be able to move through the regulatory system quickly and simply. My goal for community foundations to become part of the ordinary architecture of Australian life. Over the coming decade, I want many more Australians to have a trusted local foundation where they can give, bequeath, volunteer or help decide what the local community needs. Canada has more than 200 community foundations, more than 5 times the number in Australia. We can learn from that experience while building our own model. Warm, local, generous and suited to our regions, our suburbs, our First Nations communities and identity-based groups. Imagine an Australia in which every major town and region has a trusted vehicle for local generosity. An organisation to which a family can give to honour someone's memory. A place where a small business can back the town that backed it. A place where a bequest can keep working in the community that shaped the donor's life. Community foundations make philanthropy feel close. They help people see that giving is within reach. They turn care into structure. Second, bequest giving. Australia is about to experience one of the largest transfers of wealth in our history. The JB Weir Bequest Report estimates that at present around $150 billion a year is transferred through estates in Australia, and that the next 20 years will see $5.4 trillion change hands. That's a family story, but it's also a national story. Right now, only about 1% of bequests go to for-purpose organisations. In the US and the UK, that figure is 4%. JB Weir estimates that 7% of Australian wills include a charity, compared with 10% in the US and 14% in the UK. A very large river of wealth is flowing across generations. Only a thin stream reaches the community sector. That thin stream is still pretty significant. Annual charitable bequests in Australia are estimated at around $1.3 billion. Bequests often arrive unrestricted, giving organisations freedom to strengthen capability, systems, reserves and talent. They allow boards to think in decades rather than months. A tied grant often comes with a purpose and a clock. An untied bequest often comes with confidence and discretion. To give you a flavour of what that means, a bequest from Jenny and Bruce Pryor helped fund research at the Australian National University into dermatomyositis, a rare autoimmune disease. An $18 million bequest from historian Alan Shaw strengthened the National Gallery of Victoria. A bequest from former Play School director Jeannie McKenzie supported early career researchers at the University of Sydney's Charles Perkins Centre. A bequest from Joy Christensen to the Lost Dogs Home is helping build a new vet clinic and animal adoption centre. The common act, it goes like this. I've lived in this community, I've benefited from this society, and I want part of what I leave behind to keep doing useful work. Growing bequests requires culture, systems and trust. The cultural part begins with more Australians feeling able to talk about death, wills and legacy. Families do better when hard conversations happen early. Communities do better when planning replaces confusion. Charities do better when a donor's wishes are clear, shared and written down. The systems part means making the path easier. Many Australians still never write a will, regarding it as a life admin task somewhere between cleaning the gutters and seeing the dentist. Other people write one and never consider a charitable gift. Others include a gift that becomes vulnerable to challenge. A good bequest strategy meets each barrier. Make will writing easier, make the giving option visible, make the wording clear and durable. The trust part belongs to all of us. People leave bequests to institutions they trust. Trust grows from sound governance, clean accounts, clear purpose and visible impact. Building trust in the community through giving also involves a major role for trusted professional advisors. Lawyers, accountants, financial planners and wealth advisors are already talking with people about tax, family provision, the family home, superannuation, executors and enduring powers. One additional question can open a generous door. After looking after those closest to you, would you like part of your estate to support a cause, institution or community you care about? That question treats legacy as more than asset division. It invites people to think about values. People trust advisors because they have the knowledge and expertise to help them make good decisions, including about giving. And there's an opportunity to build that capability up further. Accountants would be expected to know what a self-managed super fund is. Shouldn't they also know what a giving fund is and how to establish one? Today I want to encourage professional bodies, philanthropy organisations, community foundations and charities to work together to build these professional skills so advisors can play their part in strengthening a culture of generosity. Bequest giving should feel less like a niche practice for grand donors and more like a normal part of Australian estate planning. The great wealth transfer should become a great trustworthiness transfer. Third, digital capability. Charities have heart, but they also need systems. A purpose-driven organisation needs volunteers and donors. It also needs cybersecurity, data capability, donor stewardship, evaluation tools, accessible websites, and the confidence to use new technology well. The digital divide in the charity sector is real. Large organisations may have data teams, cyber systems, and customer relationship management platforms. Smaller charities may have a laptop, a spreadsheet, and a website that badly needs updating. That gap has some consequences. It shapes whether a charity can protect donor data, match volunteers, measure impact, reach isolated people, apply for grants, manage risks, and, of course, make the most of artificial intelligence. Info Exchange, led by David Spriggs, has been the sector's strongest voice on this challenge. Its annual Digital Technology in the Not-for-Profit Sector report shows where charities are making progress, where risks are growing, and where support is needed. Digital tools can also help rebuild participation. Digital volunteering can widen the doorway into service. Platforms such as Volley allow skilled Australians to help charities remotely, making volunteering more accessible for people in regional communities, people with disability, carers and those whose work hours make rostered volunteering hard. Digivol turns spare moments at home into scientific and cultural infrastructure. In its first decade, volunteers completed nearly 9 million transcriptions of museum labels, archival documents and camera trap projects. The National Library's Trove voluntroves have gone further still, correcting more than 500 million lines of text, making Australia's historic newspapers easier for everyone to search. We should build on that. Australians should aim for a charity sector with stronger digital capacity by 2030. That can begin with a national compact between charities, businesses, universities, philanthropy and skilled volunteers. Technology companies can contribute cyber expertise. Consultancies can help charities improve data systems. Universities can connect students with projects that build real-world skills. Philanthropists can fund capability as well as programs. Larger charities can share tools with smaller ones. Skilled Australians should be able to volunteer from wherever they live. Think of it as a digital working bee. The old working bee painted the hall and fixed the fence. The modern version can secure the website, clean the database, build the volunteer roster and persuade people that password 123 has had its day. Less paint in the overalls, more two-factor authentication. This is one of the best ways corporate Australia can support civil society. Many companies already donate money. More can donate capability. A charity digital compact would have the aim that by the end of the decade, more charities should have the tools, skills and confidence to use technology safely and well. Fourth, partnership on reform. Two major reports now give Australia a strong reform agenda for philanthropy and the not-for-profit sector. The Productivity Commission's Future Foundations for Giving report makes the case for stronger foundations for Australian philanthropy. Its recommendations include major reform of the tax-deductible gift system, better access to philanthropy for First Nations people, rules that give donors confidence that gifts will be well used, improvements to structured giving vehicles, and better public information on charities and giving. Alongside that, the not-for-profit sector development blueprint is a 10-year plan developed through consultation with the sector. It identifies areas where charities and not-for-profit organisations say reform is needed, including funding, philanthropy and data. It also emphasises shared decision-making, First Nations self-determination, community control, workforce issues and volunteering. Looking ahead, it points to the need for better digital capability, more use of evidence and outcomes measurement, and support for innovation across the charity sector. The government will continue to work with the charity sector, philanthropy, business, professional advisors, First Nations organisations, regulators, states and territories on the recommendations of both reports. Some reforms can happen quickly. Others will take detailed design. Some will require legislation. Others depend on sector leadership, professional norms and institutional culture. Our aim is more joining, connecting, giving and volunteering, backed by institutions people can trust. That's also why the relationship between government and charities must be mature. Government has responsibilities that charities can't replace. Charities should never become an alibi for inadequate public services. Medicare, public schools, income support, aged care, disability services, housing, disaster response and the justice system are core public responsibilities. But government can't replace civil society either. A government program can deliver a service. A charity can also create a relationship. A government agency can process a payment. A community organisation can notice that someone stopped turning up. A regulator can protect minimum standards. A local group can create the trust that makes people seek help before the crisis deepens. Australia needs strong public institutions and strong civic institutions. The best societies have both. So, what should we ask of each other? Government should keep improving the operating environment. Simpler rules, smarter regulation, support for advocacy and strong charity oversight. Business should treat civil society as more than a sponsorship opportunity. A firm can lend its tech team, buy its catering from a social enterprise, or make pro bono contribution one of the things that counts in promotion decisions. Professional advisors should help generosity enter ordinary financial conversations. Accountants, lawyers and planners have a special place of trustworthiness. Used well, that trust can widen the social base of giving. Philanthropy should fund capability as well as programs. A charity with weak systems, poor data and no reserves is being asked to fly through turbulence with a thin wing. Charities should keep earning trust through governance, transparency and impact. The sector's independence is precious. So is public confidence. Citizens should give, volunteer, join and bequeath. Ideally, not all in the same afternoon, though the community foundations in the room would be delighted to discuss your availability. At heart, this is about recovering the habit of acting together. Civil society is a contact sport. In an age of outrage, that habit is harder to sustain. Social media trains us to react. Community life asks us to commit. A feed gives us the illusion of participation. A committee gives us minutes, rosters, awkward conversations, and the miraculous discovery that people who disagree on politics can still organise a sausage sizzle together. Might sound a bit humble, but it's how democratic muscle is built. Every community group is a small school of democracy. People learn to chair meetings, keep accounts, resolve disputes, welcome newcomers, share credit, absorb disappointment and try again. These are democratic skills and a country loses them at its peril. The decline in volunteering and group membership is therefore more than a social trend. It's a warning about civic capacity. The good news is that social capital can be rebuilt. We rebuild it when a young person joins a surf lifesaving club, when a retired teacher becomes a reading buddy, when a local business backs a community foundation, when a donor leaves a bequest to a cause that shaped their life, when a charity upgrades its systems and reaches more people, when a neighbourhood house becomes the place where newcomers and locals meet over lunch. We rebuild it when Australians move from spectators to participants. The next decade gives us a chance to do something substantial. By 2030, Australia's set a goal of doubling philanthropy. By 2036, we should aim for community foundations to be an ordinary feature of Australian civic life. Over the same period, we should lift bequest giving from a modest flow into a strong current. And we should make digital capability a normal part of charity strength. These are goals for government, the sector, business, professions and citizens. Because trust can't be delivered like a parcel. It's built through repeated acts, reliable institutions and shared work. In Middlemarch, George Eliot wrote that the growing good of the world is partly dependent on unhistoric acts. Most charitable work is like that. The mentor whose name never appears in a headline. The committee treasurer who balances the books after dinner. The volunteer driver, the board member. The donor who gives without fanfare. The person who writes a bequest into a will, then tells no one beyond the family and their solicitor. Unhistoric acts make a country habitable. They're also the answer to one of the anxieties of our time. Many Australians feel that life is becoming more transactional, more hurried, more fragmented. They sense that algorithms know them better than their neighbours do. They want belonging, but the old joining pathways have frayed. Our task is to build new pathways. More local giving, more bequest giving, better digital capability, stronger institutions and deeper partnerships. That is a trust agenda for Australia. Let me end where I began, on Auckland Island. The Grafton survivors lived because they acted like a community before anyone came to rescue them. They built shelter, shared labour, kept morale alive, played chess and trusted one another enough to attempt a 450-kilometre rescue voyage in a dinghy. Modern-day Australia is a long way from 19th century Auckland Island, but the lesson echoes down the centuries. A country's future depends partly on what its people can do together. Charities help Australians do things together. They turn sympathy into action, strangers into neighbours. Australia sees helpers after fires, floods and hard diagnoses. The challenge now is to become a country of joiners again. A country where more people volunteer through organisations, where more people take part in local groups, where more people trust their neighbours, where more people leave something behind for the community that helped shape them. Trust will be rebuilt by making it easier for Australians to act together. That's the work of charities. It's the work of government. It's the work of all of us. And it is work worth doing. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Minister. You detailed the decline of participation in groups and organisations and groups themselves. There's also been a decline in the fertility rate. Now, speaking from personal experience, once you have kids, you get very conscious of the community. Is the playground up to scratch? Are the footpaths safe? How's the local school going? Do you think there's a link between the two? And if so, is there anything the government can do about that or not?
It's a great question, Tom, and certainly not, I'm delighted by it because it was not the question I expected you to start off with. Normally, for those who don't often attend Press Club talks, basically we give a speech and then the questions are about what's on the front page of the papers. And so, Tom, I know you're doing your bit for the country. Congratulations on your upcoming third child. But you're right that the fertility rate is falling. My read of the evidence is that the best thing that a country can do if it wants to raise its fertility rate is to invest in early childhood services. It became one of the priorities for the Prime Minister. He set it out in his early budget replies, making clear that we wanted to move away from a situation in which some professional women found themselves working the second or the third day for free. So significant investment in the early childhood system, taking away the burden of return to work is good for productivity, but my read is it's also really good for fertility. Unlike a baby bonus, it's an investment which flows through the education of young Australians through a service that isn't just babysitting, but is a core part of the education system. And as we look to raise wages in that sector and improve professionalisation, we've not only seen a greater uptake, but also an improvement in the quality of the early childhood sector.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the groups in Auckland Island were studied as to who were parents and who were not. There's my working theory though. The other thing that's increased a lot in this century is everything being online, so much so that you now say something's IRL if it's actually in real life, which it's kind of bizarre. We've got a term for that if you think about it. Do you see a link to that as well? Because there are lots of online groups, but that aspect of physically meeting up and starting the small talk and finding you've got something in common with someone who you didn't think can often lead to so much more. Is that another change again? Is there anything the government can do about that? Not really.
Yeah, I think that's huge, Tom. I was looking at a study for the US the other day. I don't think we've got these data for Australia yet. And it was looking at the amount of time that's spent alone by age. And traditionally, that line has sloped down. Sloped up. People spend the least amount of time alone as they're younger, and then as they get older and older, they spend an increasing share of their time alone. But in the US, this now looks like a U-shape. Young people, particularly young men, are spending more time alone than are retirees. So we're seeing this shift towards engaging in person, from engaging in person towards engaging online. And partly that's because socialising is a habit. The more you do, the easier it gets. When I first became a politician, it felt very weird to walk into a room and walk up to a group of strangers, interrupt their conversation and have a chat with them. Now it feels completely natural. But if you stop doing it for a few weeks, suddenly it feels unusual again. And young people are falling out of the habit of socialising. We're seeing a decline in the share of young people who have a driving licence, who go on dates, who socialise with others. The social media minimum age has helped with that. I notice with our own children, setting a minimum of 15 to get a mobile phone helps them engage with others. But I think there's a lot more that we can do as a community to move towards the Australia that I think we all want. Remember at the start, I talked about those magical experiences in life. The experiences that you look back on, that you really feel shaped you. So few of those are going to be scrolling a bottomless feed. So many are going to be engaging with others. So it's the work of governments in part, but also the tech companies and parents and all of us to remind one another that the best things in life don't happen on a screen.
I like the idea of the 15-year-old ban on the phone. I might have a word later on how to enforce it. Matthew Cranston from The Australian.
Dr. Leigh, I'd like to ask you about the impact of tax changes on donations to charities. Under your new tax rules, under new tax changes, trusts will have to pay 30% on distribution income, and that's before the trust or the beneficiaries can make a donation to charities. So some estimates have been that that will reduce donations made to charities by about $3 billion over 5 years beginning July 2028. So my question is, will you consider some sort of exemption on that? So, for example, you might allow donations to be made to charities before the trust pays the tax, or might you carve out, say, for example, self-assessing entities in that? And if you give me that classic politician answer of we're just consulting on that, we'll sort it out, Matthew, then can I ask what are some of the non-negotiables in that consultation, and did Treasury or your government estimate the impact from these tax changes on donations to charities?
Matt, thanks very much for the question. The first thing I'd say is that most donations that come through bequests are much simpler than that. Someone writes a will, the money flows out of the estate and it goes to the charity. It's also the case that charitable trusts are carved out of our reforms. But there have been issues raised with us around discretionary trusts and distributions to non-profit entities. Again, we're not talking about entities which have deductible gift recipient status. We're talking about non-tax deductible entities. We've engaged with the sector. We've had a range of constructive conversations around that. But what's not negotiable is we can't keep the tax system with the unfairness that it currently has baked into it. The changes to trusts, to negative gearing, to capital gains are put in place because of the need to tackle this huge challenge of housing affordability, which is decreasing the trust that many young Australians feel about politics. You know, I had a young couple come up to me at a street stall in Gungahlin, a teacher and a firefighter, and they said, we feel in the current environment as though we have to choose between buying a house and having a family, because we're not sure how we can pay the mortgage if one of us was to take a significant chunk of time out of the labour market. And that invariably starts to drive people away, not only from government, but from a sense that society has their back. So the tax changes are driven at making the system fairer, making the place a little kinder towards those who felt as though they're being left on the margins of Australian society as the home ownership rate continues to decline.
And so, was there any estimate from the Treasury or the government on the impact of the tax changes on donations to charities?
Yeah, look, we modelled a whole range of things as we brought the changes into place. We're engaging really constructively with the group of people who've raised this issue with us. It's an issue we're aware of, as with some of the other issues such as capital gains tax and startups, and we're working through those issues.
Was there a number on that, by the way, or?
Look, there's a whole range of modelling that have been done. I'm not at liberty to release modelling at the Press Club today.
Thanks.
But this is on the list of could be changed rather than no, we're not changing it.
We're definitely engaging with the sector. We have a goal to double philanthropy by 2030. We're on track towards that goal, and we've made a whole host of changes, many of which I detailed in the speech, to try and boost giving. The charity sector has a strong friend in the Albanese government, so we're very keen to continue to engage with the sector.
Emily Saunders from the Nine Network.
Thank you, Dr. Leigh, for your speech. Just back on the participation rates in terms of social clubs, groups and charities. We spoke about young people, but you mentioned the couple that you met in Canberra as well. There are more people who are doing it tough financially, who maybe pick up a second job or work longer hours just so they can try and make ends meet. How do you convince those people that joining a group or volunteering is also in their interest to spend their time when they're already trying to work more and try and keep more of their money too?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the greatest rewards of this is what they call the helper's high. That sense that you get when you assist a cause that's bigger than yourself, the warm inner glow, if you like. If you've raised money for a good cause, if you've helped to teach a migrant English, if you've volunteered on a Saturday morning park run, one of our great community success stories, you get a sense as to what it is to give back to the community. We can talk to Andrew Dempster afterwards, who's founded one of our park runs here in the ACT, not only about what he feels he's given, but what he feels he's got. But as Australians fall out of the habit of joining and volunteering and giving, we miss that experience of the helper's high, and it can be too easy to fall into a more individualised society. One of the reasons I mentioned the decline in religious participation is that often attending a religious service is the place where someone is asked to volunteer. My late grandparents, Rolly and Jean Stebbins, who were very actively involved in their local church in Victoria, and they used to, by dint of that, be involved in everything from blood drives to having refugees stay in their home. Religious organisations have been a pathway to community engagement, and so as they've declined, so some of the other organisations that meshed in with them have also had more challenges.
Next question, Lucinda Garbutt-Young from AAP.
Thank you so much, Dr. Leigh. I'm going to play into the aforementioned press club trope of listening to a great speech and asking about something entirely different. As an economist, there's a lot of your colleagues who feel that stamp duty is a fairly inefficient tax and would like to see it removed in favour of broad-based land tax. The ACT has today announced as part of their budget that they'll scrap it for all first home buyers. Dom Perrottet in New South Wales tried to go a step further in 2022 and remove it entirely, but he conceded that he couldn't do that without Commonwealth help. Given that, should the Commonwealth help states and territories to remove stamp duty entirely? And are there certain things that you would like to see to perhaps free up more money for people to be able to give?
Lucinda, thanks for the question. When I was an economist at the Australian National University, I wrote a paper with Ian Davidoff on the effect of stamp duty on mobility, and we indeed showed what you might expect, that higher rates of stamp duty do reduce mobility. Stamp duty can not only act as a barrier towards moving closer to your job, but can also mean that people end up in the wrong size houses. It can discourage upsizing and downsizing. So I'd really commend the work that the ACT government has done, starting from when Katie Gallagher was Chief Minister, continuing now through the Barr government, and the announcements today of taking stamp duty off all purchases by first home buyers, I think is really significant. And the ACT has done that off its own bat. It hasn't received Commonwealth funding in order to do it, which I think demonstrates to other jurisdictions that this is possible as well. It's a reform that economists are enthusiastic about. Our focus, though, in terms of the reforms we pay for through national competition policy, has been on reforms in the competition space. We're working with states on rezoning and planning and zoning reforms, on occupational licensing. So it's been those pro-competition reforms that have been at the heart of the $900 million productivity fund that the Treasurer has set up.
Would you, as an economist, though, like to see the scrapping of these taxes go further than just first home buyers?
Look, I think it makes sense to reduce the taxes that have the largest burden. We know that insurance taxes and stamp duties have what economists call a high excess burden, meaning that we reduce much more economic value for every dollar that we raise through those taxes.
It won't happen amongst the states, though. They won't scrap it totally unless the Commonwealth is not necessarily just writing a cheque, but driving it, making it work through the tax mix in some way. That's the reality, isn't it? Doesn't the federal government have to step up if they want to see this happen?
Tom, I wouldn't infantilise the state treasurers that much. I think there's a lot of great reform coming from a Commonwealth level, but I think we also have some pretty terrific state treasurers who are engaged in the reform game and looking at how to get the biggest impact. States and territories have not only the most inefficient taxes, but also the most efficient taxes. So the ability for them to do a tax mix switch and boost efficiency is greater than it is for the Commonwealth.
You'll forgive me for not reading your paper. You write a lot of books and a lot of papers, but did it recommend scrapping stamp duty altogether, and how would it do that?
It was an academic analysis which was looking at the effects. So, I can walk you through the instrumental variables we used, but we didn't go into policy ramifications.
Not sure, yeah, we might lose a few viewers on instrumental variables. No offence. Let's go to Julie Hare instead, who's scribbling some notes, but about ready.
Thank you very much. If you will indulge me, I have two questions. Large, wealthy private schools have charity status, so while they have hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue, they receive perks such as income tax exemptions, GST concessions and deductible gift status. Some say the charity concession is propping up a two-class education system. So what this means is that people from incredibly wealthy families can donate to private schools, who then use that money to build multi-million-dollar architect-designed wellness centres, buildings, Olympic pools, glamorous grounds, the list goes on, and they get a tax deduction for that donation. Is this right or fair?
Julie, we've long had a system which allows people to donate to independent schools so long as that donation isn't tied to their fees. And I think in some cases that has generated assets which are not only used by the schools but also available to the community. And I'd certainly encourage independent schools to do that where you can. The theatre that Canberra Grammar has put in place, for example, is an asset that is used by the community as well as by the school. And I think that's a useful step in the social licence of a school, alongside First Nations scholarships, for example, which is something that that school does well. So yes, the government has no plans to change the tax deductibility of donations to independent schools.
I guess the question is it right or fair?
We believe it's appropriate so long as those donations are not tied to the benefits of a particular child. So the tax office in the past has looked at some instances in which parents had their arm twisted to make a donation where it looked like it was in lieu of fees. That's clearly inappropriate and that shouldn't be allowed a tax deduction.
Okay. If you will indulge me, I've just got another question. As you mentioned, you used to be an economist at Australian National University. You said at the beginning of your speech that it was a speech about rebuilding trust. That institution has been gutted by an ill-informed and poorly managed, that's an understatement, $250 million cost-cutting program. Interim Vice-Chancellor Rebecca Brown told Senate estimates last week that the cost of reputational damage to the university has been estimated about $100 million, including loss of philanthropic funds. As a local MP, what did you make of what went on? And is the resignation of the Vice-Chancellor, Chancellor and 5 members of the Council sufficient to right the ship?
Julie, no one's written more about this than you, so I answer your question with some trepidation. But yes, like anyone else in the Canberra community, I've been troubled by what we've seen at the Australian National University. It remains a great institution. There are many terrific faculty there, and I would encourage any parents watching with a kid in Year 12 who are thinking about where that child should go to consider the Australian National University. It has a range of first-class scholars, clearly the best philosophy department in Australia, great strengths in areas such as physics and, you know, even some good economists. It has clearly, as you say, taken some blows over the course of the last year. I would leave it to the independent regulator, TEXA, in terms of the specific interventions that are in place. But I know that Alicia is the local member representing the ANU. Dave Smith, Katie Gallagher and I strongly support the ANU and want to see it regain its status as being one of Australia's great institutions.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
We're going to go to the sector now. David Crosby from Community Council for Australia.
Great.
Good afternoon, Minister, and thanks for the speech and for all you do for the sector. And thanks to Morris and the National Press Club for prioritising this sector. We don't often get on the national stage, even though I think we have a very important contribution to make. My question goes to some of the charities you used in your example have DGR and some don't. So some I give to and I get a refund for giving to, and some I don't. The Productivity Commission recommended opening up DGR. Can you tell us where you're up to with implementing that recommendation?
No, thanks, David, and thanks for all you do for the sector through the Community Council for Australia and your role on the Australian Charities Not-for-Profits Commission Advisory Board. It's greatly valued by all of us in the room. The recommendations of the Productivity Commission in 2024 were for an opening up of the deductible gift recipient regime. It's not the way you would design it if you were starting from scratch today. Some 50 categories, and charities have to fit themselves into one of those categories, not being able to cross the streams. The Productivity Commission recommended a more principles-based approach, which would bring in organisations such as public media and animal welfare charities. Our challenge is that that comes with a significant fiscal tag attached. And at a time with the budget in deficit, it's incumbent upon us to work out how we manage to identify appropriate saves which would fund that important reform.
Maybe through trusts?
Maybe through trust, was that the question? Did you want to answer that, Minister?
Yeah, so we've certainly announced changes in trusts, but the changes in negative gearing, capital gains and trusts that the Treasurer announced are very much to fund the significant tax cuts. The $1,000 instant tax deduction, the $250 working Australian tax offset for business, the instant asset write-off being made permanent and loss carryback. So that package of tax reforms you should think of as being broadly revenue neutral in the last budget.
Genevieve Jacobs from Hands Across Canberra.
I'm a recovering journalist, Minister, so we'll go right back to the topic of your speech. Thank you very much for the shout-out for community foundations. Part of what you're suggesting is really cultural change in Australia, away from transactional, casual giving towards more of a whole-of-community approach. I think we need to find the levers and the resources to make that happen, however. So, for example, many small regional communities are heavily impacted by enormous energy projects as part of the energy transition, but there are a few guidelines that enforce long-lasting community benefits, perhaps through the levers of the Community Foundation. How do you think we can better embed corporate responsibility for long-term sustainable benefits for communities right across Australia?
Yeah, Genevieve, thank you for the work you do through Hands Across Canberra. I certainly was looking at you when I was suggesting that anyone who wanted to give to a local Canberra Community Foundation should seek you out after the speech.
Yeah, I'm right here, so, you know, donations welcome.
and always a strong advocate for Canberra. Yeah, I think as I was sketching out that notion of what an Australia with more community foundations look like, I did have in mind some of the conversations we've had around renewable energy and the potential of community foundations to play a role in ensuring that those renewable energy projects have social licence, and also for a firm that's setting up in a country town, engaging with a community foundation or growing a new community foundation can also help it to put roots down. In a time when, as Tom mentioned before, we're more atomised and have often more time at formal work and less time engaging with our neighbours, then community foundations can be a bit of that bridge. And ultimately, I think they've got a great role to play in terms of building local trust in an era in which scratchy politics and grievance politics has been on the rise.
Thank you, and thank you for your support.
Thank you.
On what you announced in terms of the awarding of charity status for community organisations, would there still be a ministerial veto? You know, if there's a situation where that's awarded and you think it's inappropriate, would you still have the right to intervene in that scenario?
No, we'd step through the reforms. We'd be stepping back from that process.
No veto at all.
No. Simply go through and have the streamlining that is necessary in order to quickly get community foundations up and starting. One of the things we saw under the former government was a bit of cherry picking as to when organisations got their charity status. The most or the best known of these cases was Grace Tame Foundation, which took over a year to get its charity status after its founder snubbed the Prime Minister at the Lodge. It's not appropriate that parliamentarians play those sort of political games in deciding which charities to support. The rules should be principles based, and where we can just get the minister out of the way and make the system happen quicker, that's good for charities and ultimately good for Australian community life.
There's a push from the Coalition and One Nation around making sure migrants learn English. Obviously, you might have a different way of doing it if you'd have the same view, but does it actually expand someone's horizons when they come here, being able to participate better in the community the earlier they get a command of the English language?
Look, I think it's important to speak English, and we've got adult English, migrant English programs have a very long-standing tradition in Australia. They're a terrific program which has taught many migrants to speak English. But the sort of dog whistling we've gotten both from the Coalition and from One Nation is somehow suggesting that someone who doesn't speak perfect English, an Italian nonna who has been here for decades and raised children in the community, is somehow a lesser Australian. I think that sort of divisive rhetoric is deeply degrading to the Australian social fabric. Now, you know, I'm also the Assistant Minister for Competition, and I think if there's any party that should get dinged for misleading and deceptive conduct, it's One Nation, which isn't seeking to bring us together as one nation, but is seeking to tear us apart and to make political capital from doing so. And this is just another example of that.
Speaking of One Nation, it does like to talk about patriotism. Is patriotism harnessed the right way something that can lead to more involvement in the community, being proud of your country, wanting to make it a better place?
Yeah, and the values that I think of as being essential to Australian patriotism are things like egalitarianism, mateship and the fair go. They're the things that I'm deeply proud of as Australia, as an Australian, and which I think really characterise our country. But I don't see much pride in One Nation in that kind of country. They seem to be proud of an Australia that doesn't exist, a monoculture that it throws back to some bygone 19th century day. They aren't proud of the diversity of modern Australia, which is one of its great strengths. I'm a patriot because I love the way in which our nation doesn't see anyone as better than someone else. I'm a patriot because I believe that our multicultural democracy is one of our great strengths. I'm a patriot because I don't take fundraising flights on billionaires' jets flying over Sydney, but instead would prefer to be out chatting to constituents in Gungahlin. That, for me, is what patriotism is.
Ladies and gentlemen, please thank the Minister, Andrew Leigh.